It's time for NRCS Partyline today for your Tuesday, November the 17th, 2020. NRCS Partyline brought to you by Wimmer Opticians St. Cloud, Atlas Family Chiropractic of Waite Park. My name is Brad Melke. Good morning. The sun is shining. We're at a 22-degree temp at the moment, up to 33 today with a mix of clouds and sun, or at least partly cloudy for the most part. So 33 today, 23 tonight, 47 tomorrow with partly cloudy skies. 32 tomorrow night, by Thursday up to 48. Not too bad. Otherwise, 22 right now and some sunshine and just a light southwest breeze. My name is Brad Melke. In studio with us, we have Dennis Fuchs. He is the administrator with the Stearns County Soil and Water Conservation District. Dennis.
Good morning.
Chris Hogge joins us. District Conservationist, NRCS. Chris, good morning to you.
Good morning.
And Chris and Dennis brought a guest with us.
Joe Borgerding.
Joe Borgerding. Joe is the Outstanding Conservationist for 2020.
That's right. Well, let me just give you, the listeners, a little background information on the Outstanding Conservationist. So every year we select a Outstanding Conservationist, and this year we were in the southwest portion of the county. We rotate through the supervisor areas, and this year we were in Supervisor Dave Weller's area, which is the southwest corner of Stearns County, which included Joe Borgerding's farm. And I should also mention that Dave Weller will be retiring at the end of this year. As you probably saw on the election ballot, Ken Sheffers will now be filling those shoes in January. And I'd like to thank Dave Weller for his service. Was an excellent supervisor and really helped dictate some really good policy with the Soil Water Conservation District. I did ask him if he wanted to join us today, but he said he was just going to kind of be incognito and let Joe take care of it. So that's where we are. So every year we nominate a Outstanding Conservationist. And these are folks that really value conservation, support, and have worked with our office in implementing conservation practices. And then also are people that the board feels would be a good spokesperson for conservation and try to get more people motivated to try conservation. And it was a very difficult choice. Joe had some really tough candidates against him. But one thing that, and when we were reviewing all the candidates, that we thought that Joe was unique. As a lot of the neighbors know, Joe is unique. And one of the unique things that he was trying was reduce tillage in an organic system. And the board was very impressed because that's not easy. You know, you're not using herbicides, pesticides out there, and you got to use crop rotation and really know what you're doing in order to reduce that tillage in an organic system. So that kind of pushed Joe over the edge. He's also Minnesota Ag Water Quality certified. He's been that he had that certification a couple years ago already. He's drank that 12-pack of beer from Third Street Brewery probably the day after he got certified. And but it's great to have him here, and would like to spend a little time having Joe just talk a little bit about some of the things he's doing on his farm with the listeners so that they have a little bit of understanding of why we nominated Joe as our Outstanding Conservationist. And I'd like to dedicate a lot of time just to talk to Joe about what he's doing out there.
Sure.
And Joe, I'll push the mic over your way now.
Yes, hello. Well, thank you, Dennis, and for considering me for that award. I didn't expect it, and I appreciate it. On our farm, I guess my focus has been trying to, we've been farming organic now since 2004, but I started farming what I call biological prior to that to try to restore my soil structure and health, and I think it's really made a difference in my operation and my feed quality, and also I'm watching water quality, and I think we've been able to achieve a lot of better infiltration of the water. That's a huge thing, and I think that's going to help us a lot on our farm and going forward, hanging on to our soil and holding the water that we need later in the summer by infiltrating it early in the spring instead of having it just run off and create gullies and washouts.
Sure, you sound like you're like a scientific farmer. You sound like a scientist almost.
People don't call me smart, but they call me well-read.
So this was all your idea? Was this something that was recommended and you thought, I'll try it? Or when did you first hear about that or learn about it?
Well, I was trying to get better forage utilization in my dairy cows. I worked with nutritionists that were talking about some farms that had better forage utilization. low grain feeding, high efficiency, healthy cattle, healthy feet and legs, just by forage-based diets. And that was kind of my focus from day one, to try to feed more forage and keep the cattle healthy. And so I met a farmer who was doing just that, and I found out he was using a lot of eggshells and lime and things like that to maintain a different balance in his soil than most of us were focused on. And that really made a difference to me, was to get to start focusing on the soil, because I had been having trouble with forage quality and all kinds of issues. And then the tillage, my soil got harder and harder and less aggregated. And with that, I was breaking my plow and my chisel plow and just having to hook up more horsepower. And I said, there's something going wrong here. And so I was really anxious to see what would happen if I changed my soil balance and my practices. And it's just been a fun ride ever since, because once you make the decision to really look into it, and if you adopt some of the practices, it can really make a difference.
Now, Joe, have you? Can you give us a little history on the farm that you're living on? Is that your parents or grandfather? Where did you come from, Joe? People wonder.
Yeah, well, I'm the 10th of 12 siblings, and my dad grew up by Freeport in the hills, and by chance he bought this farm by El Rosa, western Stearns County, Lake George Township, which is famous for its potholes and mud and heavy clay and quack grass and cattails and mosquitoes. And so Dad never really quite got accustomed to the soil type. So it always was an issue. When is it going to get dried out? When are we going to be able to till it decent? Why do we always have ruts? And why do we always have yellow corn and poor alfalfa? He said, it's not like it was by Freeport. So Stearns County, which is what we're focused on here, is very, very blessed with good soils, but not Lake George Township so much. So the problems that I'm talking about were accentuated because of our anaerobic, alkaline, wet soils. So the problems multiplied faster. Most farmers probably see some of these symptoms. I think I saw most of the problems showed up on our farm. I was heavily into chemicals and fertilizers and everything conventional, and it really seemed to accelerate the deterioration of my soils. So for me, it was I had to change. I had to do something different. We were not able to grow good enough feed and enough bushels and enough good quality hay. So once we started looking at hay quality and forage quality, which was my focus, I realized we needed to do something different, and I happened to run across the right people, the right sources. I read a lot of books on soil and soil health from the 40s and 50s. There's a lot of good knowledge out there, and now in the last 5 years, we've acquired a lot of new knowledge. I think up until 10 years ago or 5 years ago, we probably knew more about the soil on the moon than we did about our own soils and how to understand the biology in our soils. Yeah. Which I'm very impressed with the new knowledge that they're coming out with, and it really helps me understand the things that we've been trying to do. And now it's much easier to understand it because we actually have research on it.
We got about a minute and a half before I got to stop you, Joe, and everybody. But I was just going to ask you, Joe, you were self-aware of what the soil conditions were prior to all of this, moving forward and changing things. You did the research. You were getting advice from others. You had a goal in mind, but did you know exactly the recipe to get to that ultimate goal, or were you just hoping, well, if I try this and this and this, hopefully we'll get to that end point that I'm looking at?
No, I didn't know where it was all going to lead, but I knew it had to change, and I knew that there was other farms that had better soil. My dad would say that the only time we ever had good quality hay was in the dry years. So we did a lot of drain tile, and that's where this soil and water district, that all helps getting your drainage planning and just the knowledge of how much tile, where to put it. But the anaerobic soil, most people don't know really how bad it can be, but it can really get sour. And so I'm a dairy farmer at heart, and the getting good quality forage was my goal, and that's what it was based on. And so we started reducing potassium applications and doubled down on the calcium and sulfur. we don't get acid rain anymore for free.
Yeah.
So now we have to buy sulfur in Lake George Township, which we never did before.
Sure.
So things changed over time, and I had to learn to adapt to it.
Tell you what, let's take a break. We'll talk more with Joe Borgerding and also our guest, Chris Hogge, and also Dennis Fuchs, Soil and Water Conservation. We're talking about the Outstanding Conservationist, Joe Borgerding, in studio. We'll be back with more information. It's 9:30 news time, 23 degrees, KASM Radio. And so Partyline continues here on KASM Radio, visiting with Dennis Fuchs from SWCD, Chris Hogge from NRCS, and the Outstanding Conservationist of 2020. Also in studio, Joe Borgerding. We left off with Joe talking about using all of these scientific terms, and you know, Joe, I was listening over the break, and you had said oxygen, air in the soil, how important that really is.
Yeah, that's something that they've been emphasizing a lot at recent meetings. I've been involved in regenerative agriculture meetings and some of the classes on that, and you're never realizing the importance of oxygen. I always say, well, crops need carbon dioxide, and they're going to pull it from the air, but the crops are largely nourished through biology, and the biology needs the oxygen. So every time we get a low pressure system, if your soil is properly structured, you can take in the air you need to get the biology working. And on our farm in particular, anaerobic conditions were a big part of the problem, and that's why we've had to learn as much as we can about drainage and soil structure and compaction, and just all those little things can really make a difference. And I'm not saying we've been totally successful by any means, but we have certainly learned a lot and come a long ways, and I think we're on a good path to solving some of these issues in the future. Every farm has different soil. Mine are particularly challenging, I think, and but everybody can benefit from understanding their soil, and it's not always about inputs; it's about practices. And what I like is you don't have to buy practices; you just have to learn them one time.
Right.
Sometimes at great expense.
But every year that practice may change, right? I mean, depending on what type of year you have.
Yeah, we float with the times, and every year is different, and that's why our rotation. People ask me what my rotation is, and I just say it's complex, and it's constantly changing, according to what we're targeting, what we're after.
Yeah.
We like to have a lot of fungal growth, before soybeans. We like to have a lot of bacterial growth before corn. People don't understand that, but it really makes a difference in how your weeds are going to react. And I like knowing that I don't have to, with our good rotation, we've eliminated a lot of the problems that other people are struggling with. We don't have to worry about chemical resistance because weeds are still not resistant to iron. So we do some tillage, but now I'm trying to do it without even the iron, without the tillage, and minimizing the tillage. I think that's going to help us improve our structure, which is going to give us more of that important air in our soil, which it's all about aerobic soil and good, healthy biology.
So when I was out at Joe's farm, when was that? August, September? Looking at your cornfield, and on the end rows, there were some weeds there. The corn still looked very good. But then we got into the cornfield, and I was amazed the lack of weeds out there with what Joe was doing with his rotation and cover crops. And maybe you could just share some of the strategies that you're using to help manage the weeds out there.
Well, I think it's important to not have an overdose of soluble nitrogen. If you put too much nitrogen on too early in the season, you're gonna push your weeds a little sooner than before your crop has a chance to canopy. So that's one practice. So we like manure, and we're in Stearns County. We have to talk about livestock, and I think livestock really makes soil management so much easier because you've got the manure and you've got a place to grow forages, which a good long rotation with some alfalfa and grass can really give your soil structure a break and give it a chance to restructure. And then a lot of the cover crops that we grow, you can graze them, you can forage, harvest them, and make use of those. And that sets you up for the next year's success. Maybe producing nitrogen with your legumes and plowing down manure to grab some extra nitrogen from the air, and things like that can really do a lot to make for a good corn crop. But it's a 2 or 3 year setup that you start with. You have to plan to produce some of that nitrogen instead of just making a phone call and buying it. And then we get a nice slow release from the breakdown of the organic matter. And so if we plow down a green cover crop, that kind of likes to release the nitrogen throughout July and August and September when you really need the nitrogen. And instead of having nitrogen available in, say, in May or June, when the corn isn't using it yet, and the weeds would love to grab it. So just things, a lot of cover crops wherever we can. Now it's been tough the last couple of years. So we started interseeding our corn when it's just about knee high. When we do our last cultivation, we'll interseed some clovers and grasses and maybe some radishes. So now this fall we've got green cover crops growing. Oh, I should show you the pictures. We've got green cover crops growing between the rows as we've combined the corn now, and we've got green cover coming up in this nice. When we get this fall Indian summer, we get a lot of nice growth. So now I'm strip tilling, and I'm able to leave that green cover for next spring while I'm strip tilling in between. So I'm preparing my ground for next spring, and I'm only moving about a third of the soil as what I would have used to with a chisel plow. So I'm reducing the tillage and still maintaining a green cover crop because we have such a short season up here in Minnesota.
Now, when do you usually typically plant your corn? Is that middle, end of May? Because you kind of want to manage that first flush of weeds before you put the corn out, plant the corn.
Yeah, and we also want to make sure we have untreated seed in organic. We don't have seed treatment, so it's important that our seed pop out of the ground real quick. There could be wireworms or some mold, rotting of seed. So we wait till the ground is good and warm, and we also, because of organic, we wait so we get a later pollination, so we don't get cross-pollinated with conventional GMO-type corn.
Joe, you're always. Oh, I'm sorry, Des. I was going to say, you're always, like you said, you're kind of tweaking things and adjusting things. And does it ever come to the point where you have that? Okay, this is what works. This is what I'm going to stick with, or is it always evolving?
Oh, it's always evolving. And every time you make a mistake, you have to pay for it yourself because it's your mistake. It's on your farm. So
what was one of those mistakes that happened with your experience? A learning lesson, you might say.
Oh,
do we have enough time?
Quite a few of those.
Yeah, I like to tell people I learn from my mistakes, and I'm as educated as I can afford to be. So there's a lot of things. I've tried a lot of things, and we've got a scrap pile behind the shop where we experiment, we build things, and sometimes about a third of it gets thrown back out, and maybe we'll cut it up again and use it for something else. But no, we've tried a lot of things. I made a weed whacker, and it's still sitting in the grove. I'm not finished with it, but it's actually like a weed whip. 6 rows. We can go down the row, and we can trim out some of the cover crops and weeds between the row. It's a completely home built. With an old cultivator frame.
You're an inventor too, Joe.
Well, I like to think other people should have built it by now. So I'm just going to do it myself. But I've got tremendous crew. I've got my nephew's been working with me for many, many years, Roman, and I've got 2 sons that are engineers, and I got 2 other sons farming with me, and my daughter is pretty mechanical. So our family just happens to be mechanical, and we've got welders and plasma cutters, and I like iron. People that have been on my farm know I like iron.
With some of the new technology, the precision agriculture where they have GPS in your tractors and guidance systems to help you stay on the row, are you utilizing any of that technology out on your farm to keep you, like, as you're trying to do strip till and, these various conservation practices? Are you utilizing any of that precision technology?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of RTK, and we can plant with RTK, and then we can go back and cultivate. And we set our shovels a little tighter, and we made a disc cultivator that we can trim right down next to the row with that disc cultivator and pull the weeds away. And we can do that hands free and more accurately. And you can cover a lot of acres if you don't have to stare at that row all day long, and you can sit back and look back and make sure and see what kind of job you're doing instead of staring down the row all day long while you might be plowing out 2 rows behind you, but you're afraid to look back. So, RTK is a blessing for anybody organic or anybody wanting to do, doing cultivation.
So I was just going to remind our listeners that we're visiting with Joe Borgerding, our Stearns County Soil Water Conservation District Outstanding Conservationist for 2020. And typically, we would recognize Joe at our annual convention down at typically Bloomington at the Doubletree Hotel. Well, this year that is not happening. It's going to be a virtual meeting. So this was a great opportunity with KASM to invite Joe here. And thank you, Joe, for joining us on KASM. To talk a little bit about some of the stuff that he's doing on his farm, so the listeners can get to hear, some of the challenges farmers are up against when they're doing organic and you're taking a lot of the inputs out and utilizing practices to solve your problems. Now, Joe, you've got an area that you're renting, or is it land that you own on the North Fork, where it's opposite of what your Lake George Township is. Now that's more sandy. And what kind of strategies are you using there when you flip the whole scenario where now you're working with coarse textured sandy soils versus clay loams? The oxygen isn't as big of a deal there. What kind of crops are you using there, and what kind of management?
So on we rent some land that's kind of low quality marginal land, and they call it high water sand. And it can be awfully wet and anaerobic in the spring, and then it can turn dry real quickly in the summer. So what we've done there, we can't get in the spring like we'd like to plant small grain. I wouldn't put a corn crop on it because it'll run out of water. So we like to do small grain. So we struggled with small grain for a number of years. That's one of my mistakes. It took me a while to learn. So now we're growing more winter annuals, like winter triticale or rye. I tried winter barley one time. We're a little too far north. I'm growing some spelt, which is a winter annual, and we've been doing that for about 6 years now, just trying to keep some seed every year, and I think it's adapting to our climate a little bit, and it's getting a little better every year. We just do that on a couple acres every year. So the winter annual really work nice when you've got that situation where you can't be out there in the spring, so we don't have to touch it in the spring. We just wait till July and we harvest. I need straw and I need grain. So some of these things can be utilized in our rations. There's not a big market for them, but if you have livestock, you can market almost anything through livestock if you're a little creative, and that's what livestock are really good for. So yeah, we're doing things like that, and always looking for new ideas, and always anxious to try them and test them out, see what happens.
Now, spelt, that's an ancient crop. That was something that they grew many, many, many years ago. And you're also exploring a new crop, kernza, intermediate wheatgrass, and kernza is the actual seed off of that plant. How many acres of that are you checking out?
Well, we tried kernza on 3 different soil types, and to see where it's going to fit the best. And we've got about 25 acres total, and we're going to see how that goes. I'm thinking we might be making a lot of hay out of it if it doesn't make grain, but if we can get grain, that'll be great. It's all part of an experimental process to improve the crop, and so I'm going to be involved in that, I guess, as part of a group of farmers that are experimenting and working with kernza. There's a potentially good market. I think people want more natural grains. They want perennial crops, less tillage. That goes along with my thinking to minimize the tillage, and I think it's going to be a good crop in the future. Right now, it's just an experimental playground out there that we're playing with.
Yeah, we're also looking at that with the University of Minnesota Forever Green, and I think that's one of the groups you're working with, Joe, is Forever Green, and we really, as a soil water conservation district, we know kernza is not going to take over corn, soybeans, or a lot of these small grains, but it is a crop that we might want to try in areas where you've got challenges with coarse textured soils, because it's got a root that goes down below 10 feet. Once it gets established, and it's a perennial, so you don't have to plant it every year, which is very unique for cropping systems. Alfalfa is a perennial, but corn, soybean, oat, winter wheat, cereal rye, those all have to get planted. So where we're exploring with that, kernza is in the Cold Spring and Melrose wellhead protection areas, where we're trying to minimize the amount of nitrates that can move through the soil profile into our drinking water, because you don't want nitrate in your drinking water. If it exceeds 10 part per million, that's bad. And we're working with these communities in these areas, and it's just great to see. Joe is also exploring and helping develop this new crop, Kernza, because you got to learn how to grow it, and then once you got that figured out, where are you going to go with it? You need a market. And so we're also working with AURI, the Ag Utilization Research Institute, in developing markets. Just recently been visiting with the Beaver Island Brewery in downtown St. Cloud, and they're very interested in developing a product using Kernza. And there's a whole bunch of other folks that AURI is going to be reaching out to, because we now have harvested our seed, and it's out there, and we're going to be working with folks that can make products now with it. It could be bakeries, it could be breweries, it could be distilleries. All of these folks we're going to be working with. And Joe is just one of those cogs in the chain. And I know they're also working and trying to develop a Kernza growers cooperative. And I think you've been trying to be part of those discussions too, where they're trying to have some control over this new crop. And they want to price it to also bring some value to that seed for all the ecosystem services Kernza is providing for us consumers. The water quality improvements, carbon storage, because you're not messing with the soil, you're leaving that soil carbon there, and then also water quantity. Those roots continue to use water, not much more than alfalfa, but it uses them at different time periods. It's already starting to use that water in the spring when you have a lot of spring flooding, and it continues to use that water throughout the year. So you got all these stacking of these ecosystem services that Joe and the growers want to make sure that they get compensated for providing out all those values to society. So, Joe, you wanted to talk a little bit about dairy and some of the importance of what you're doing in manure, and are you injecting your manure? You've got how many cows? What are you doing there, man?
Well, we're very fortunate. We have two sons that took an interest in dairy, and they bought my dairy herd from us. So I provide the feed, and we split the milk check accordingly. So I grow all the crops and feed now, and they're taking care of the dairy, and we work together on everything, of course. But the dairy is such an important part. And Stearns County, you look at all the small towns and communities, they're largely built on what we put into our butter churns and cheese plants. Dairy really has been a big, strong, and livestock, hogs, chickens, everything has been really a big thing in Stearns County. And I know when I was working on the water, North Fork Crow River Watershed District, we kept looking at the effects of manure and the water quality and everything. And I just always said that livestock is part of the solution to the water quality. The soils that never see manure tend to be a little easier to compact and a little easier to erode, I believe. I think the manure helps keep the organic matter and stuff in the soil to give a better soil structure. So I think we end up with cleaner water if it's all handled properly. We actually literally just built a manure applicator bar last winter. My sons are engineers and welders, and so they, I bring up a lot of ideas and they put them into practice. And so now we're injecting all of our manure immediately. We used to incorporate it with a four-wheel drive tractor smearing behind it. Now we inject it directly into the soil as we go. So there's very little runoff or air, evaporation of the nitrogen. So that we're real proud that we've got that done finally. It took me a couple of years of planning to come up with the right design, but we got a nice system now.
That's neat. That's why we love having you as our outstanding conservationist. He's always experimenting and checking out new ways of getting things done. That is awesome. So I'm just going to bring up a conference that's coming up. So Joe is an organic farmer, and I know we've got a lot of organic farmers in Stearns County. They're still outnumbered with our conventional farmers, and I think we got room for everybody. And I think that's great having that diversity in our cropping systems out there, and also opening up various markets between the organic and conventional. But the soil management components, the soil health principles, I think they're very similar to either the conventional or organic systems. And there is a soil management summit that's coming up here soon. It was in St. Cloud last year. It was called the Conservation Tillage Conference. They have now modified this title and now call it the Soil Management Summit. And that's going to be happening on Tuesday and Wednesday, December 15 and 16. And this is going to be a virtual conference, so you can go online and register. It's going to cost $50. The Stearns County Soil Water Conservation District could cut that price in half. If you're interested, jump to our website and we'll help you get registered for this. We've got a way to reduce that if you're a farmer and would like to learn more about managing your soil. And who knows, you might be the next outstanding conservationist. Wouldn't that be cool?
It's going to be hard to beat Joe, though, man.
Yeah, I know. It's awesome. Well, Chris, I know you wanted to say a couple things yet.
Well, I have one question for Joe that I'll get to at the end here, but I would just like to share with the listeners today that we are in the pandemic, and there are a lot of opportunities for producers and landowners to go online and watch different training that are going on that are sometimes live, or you can there are recorded meetings that are available on the internet that you can basically just Google, and some of those places is like conservationwebinars.net. That is one that you can go to, and it talks about cover crops, grazing, nutrient management, tech talks, wildlife management, soil health, kind of a lot of what Joe's been talking about. And then you can also go to the Minnesota Board of Water and Soil Resources, which is at the bowserstate.mn.us online training. And that is also another opportunity. And they just have all kinds of different trainings that are available and information that folks can just listen to and watch on their laptops or cell phones. And just really good resources. And I guess that's going to bring me to my question for Joe. Joe, when you go back and look at how you started, what are some of the resources that you use that you could share with some of the producers in Stearns County and the rest of the state that were kind of influential in helping you make the transition to where you are today?
Well, I know when I started farming, I was very conventional, and we didn't do any grazing. I said when I got out of high school, I pulled every fence post on the farm. And then within about 15 years later, I was making fences, and I didn't know anything about it. So there I went. I attended some fencing seminars. I signed up with Equip, got some cost sharing on water line systems, and then laying down hard surface for the grazing. For the lanes, hard surfacing lanes, things like that, where I was able to get some help. And I attended field days, and I know the county puts on, field days for grazing, and for there was some for organic, and just a lot of those things that I participated in, which helped me along the way. And I read a lot, so I was able to read a lot of their publications that they put out, and listening to the radio, you pick up a little bit on Albany once in a while. And I've just been able to network with a lot of farmers and a lot of good... I met a guy, Gary Zimmer, out in Wisconsin, and he was a nutritionist. And he said to me once, too many farmers reach for the syringe. Sometimes they should reach for their soil probe. And it made a lot of sense to me that healthy soil is going to make for the healthier cattle, and it really made a difference on my farm. So that's kind of the basis for what really drove me, and I could see the progress, and so it keeps me going, and it gives me a chance to be successful enough to pass it on to my family. So that's the direction we're heading, and we're pretty happy about it.
Joe Borgerding, 2020 Outstanding Conservationist. Congratulations, Joe. Again, the knowledge that you have, just the way you talk, you are a well-read, you know what you're doing, Joe.
Thank you.
All right. Dennis Fuchs.
Thank you very much.
You know what you're doing?
Well, don't talk to my friends.
And Chris Hogge joining us as well. Chris Hogge, thanks for joining us. Chris, Joe, and Dennis. Chris is the District Conservationist of the Natural Resource Conservation Service. Dennis is the administrator with the Stearns County Soil and Water Conservation District, and also Outstanding Conservationist Joe Borgerding, all with us this morning. Thanks, everybody, for your time today. Appreciate it.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving, everyone. Minute past 10 o'clock, we've got some news coming up, KASM Radio.